just to kind of put a little context around this particular session, before I came to Raleigh, I did a little look-see about with North Carolina and just the state of technology here, looking at multiple headlines and things like that, and all of it is incredibly positive. Things like it's a tech hub, tech job boom. You all are leaders in tech startups, higher percentage of women in the workforce, high levels of academic R&D and funding. I mean, cannot overstate how wonderful it seems to be here. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to having an ecosystem where you have the people and organizations who are connected, both inside and outside of government. So I'm just kind of curious, since you all play very different roles, just how would you, from your vantage point, how would you describe the technology ecosystem in North Carolina and how your organization fits into it? Let's start here.
Okay, I'll go first. I will try to turn the mic on. It was angry a second ago. How about now?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I guess I'll step back and say the tech, I'll let Brooke speak to the writ large tech ecosystem. I can talk about the Cleantech ecosystem, which is, the convergence of energy and technology solutions. So for that particular ecosystem, it's thriving. In North Carolina, or in this region, it represents something like 28,000 people working in clean tech. It's growing by 24%, over the next 5 years, and it's characterized by, we have something like 1,900 companies working in, clean tech. Does everybody know what clean tech is? Clean tech is, if you have a Nest thermostat in your home, it gives you data so you can make smarter decisions about when to turn your heat on. But those kinds of solutions are also on the grid, on water utilities, and in many places you don't see. So that particular industry is thriving, and it's everything from like ABB's North American headquarters, huge global leader, to very small startups of like 1 or 2 people. So I'd characterize that as very robust and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
From an unmanned standpoint, North Carolina's ecosystem is unbelievable. As you heard on the last panel from Darshan Devakaran, our state is leading the way in an ecosystem where the key, where we're separated from all the other states, is communication. We've got all the different entities, all the different state agencies, business and industry, the K-12 system, community colleges, university, everyone's buying into the ecosystem of we need to work together for unmanned technology. So it's really helped foster a fast growth rate for the state in unmanned technology and aviation as a whole.
So the North Carolina Technology Association is so named because there are a lot of segments within that. We talked about Cleantech, we've talked about unmanned technology, we've talked about the fact that so many really every organization, if they're not tech, they're certainly tech enabled. So while our association typically focuses pretty heavily on IT, what you traditionally think of as technology, it's much broader than that. And so we do pay attention to things like what is the employment outlook, what's the demand, the supply for tech talent. I think North Carolina has a lot of strengths, which you alluded to, but among them are a combination of things that combine geography, where we are, the fact that we have very successful, strong universities and educational systems here. We have a tradition of being collaborative, I think, in this state, in this region. I think you'll hear that a lot. We hear that a lot from people who aren't from here, who then come here and begin to plug in. They're almost amazed at the degree to which people really work well together and seek to do that. There's a saying you often hear, which is, this is an area where it's very easy to get your first meeting. You have to earn your second meeting. But people are very willing, even in perhaps what might be considered a competitive environment, to assist others. So I think as important as some of the technical stuff and infrastructure, it's the nature of the way we tend to work together in this region, in the state.
So what's underlying that? Because you said collaboration, you said communication. What are you all doing differently that everybody else isn't doing? What's your secret sauce, if you can share that?
I want to add just one comment on that. I think kind of underlying this, like since we're at a government tech conference, is that we have in North Carolina something like 12 public administration programs at our universities, so we are training government leaders, and UNC Chapel Hill has a fantastic program.
Yeah.
And so we're training leaders to go into public service who are tech savvy. I guess what I'm getting at, we have a very professionalized government workforce here that are seeking innovation, and so that is a tangible factor that contributes to the tech ecosystem here.
That's fair.
And then on the communication and collaboration, the secret sauce, what would you all say that really helps you do it better than maybe others?
I don't know what we do better than others. It just seems to be the environment here, and we hear it a lot from people who come here. Maybe it's just a region of the country is sort of that way. But I do think too, there's so much interaction already. Maybe that's it, is that we cross each other's paths all the time. We tend to be, it's a small enough big state that we tend to know each other's organizations, and there's sort of one degree of separation, and I think that breaks down barriers. A lot of our institutions work well together, while maybe not on the basketball court or the football field. The things that go on between State, Carolina, and Duke, just as an example, are phenomenal. The work they're doing together across all sorts of departments would blow your mind in terms of the collaboration and cooperation there, and that's in a very competitive environment. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a secret sauce, but we seem to have bottled whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a unique recipe that the state has mastered. In unmanned aviation, again, it's this unique effort that we're a very prideful state. We're very proud of what we do here. From athletics to industry to education, we're all very proud of it. When it comes to unmanned aviation, everyone seems to put their egos aside and say, we need to work together, partner together. But at the same time, like one of your panelists or maybe it was someone in the crowd said earlier this morning, is we have to be okay with saying we don't know. This is all uncharted territory with new technology, with aviation. And right now, everyone in this room, whether it's tech, aviation, or unmanned, or whatever, we're all writing that user manual as we go. Because we are in that uncharted territory. But as North Carolina in that recipe that's so great is everybody understands that, and we're willing to admit that and work together to make a better product and environment.
So can you all kind of give some examples, since we're talking a lot about partnership right now, about what partnerships that you have seen work really well, either within your organization or as with you, since you see a lot of different organizations. Just kind of give us some more tangible examples about that collaboration in North Carolina.
I'll kick off. I'll give you an example in our case that people are often surprised by when they first encounter it. So the North Carolina Technology Association is not a unique animal. There are organizations like ours in most states or regions, and we have a federation of us, so I know them, and we talk together. In fact, I was just last week with all of my counterparts around the country, and they were surprised that in our case, we have an open membership. So any company, organization, or entity can be a member of ours. And about a fourth of our members are nonprofit, education, or governmental. So government departments, agencies, and so on are members. The Office of State CIO, you heard from Eric Boyette today, very active with us. His whole team and all of his CIOs at the agencies and their teams are members of ours, as an example. So when I pull together the vendor community with the state CIO and or his team, deputies, and so on, for a session where they're talking about initiatives and problems they need to solve and so forth. It's not a procurement vendor conversation. It's a team conversation. They're all members of ours. So when they come together, there's this peer environment, not a seller-buyer environment. And I can multiply that example times many. So when you have that sort of setting, and I think a lot of our groups do that, sort of, you bring together policymakers with officials within state government who might be in charge of implementing that policy or determining procurement practices and so forth, with the business partners who they either work with or might like to work with. It changes the whole demeanor of the discussion and of the ongoing relationship when you're all part of the same club.
Very similar with North Carolina. Earlier this week, the Division of Aviation released a letter saying that they are the gateway for everything unmanned in North Carolina. So what that letter says is that if you are going to do anything unmanned, you have to go through Division of Aviation to set that up. Well, that's taking ownership of a new child and fostering the growth of a newborn child, basically, in unmanned aviation. And what's really unique about that, and a partnership that has really seemed to work, is that with the ownership of Division Aviation, everyone feels entitled and okay with coming to the table. So your K-12 system, your university system, your emergency management, the state fire marshal's office, all these entities say, we're glad you own it. We want to help. We want to be a part of it. How can we work together? In our business, we've had the luxury over the past 2 years traveling the world to talk about how we set this up in North Carolina through education and training and different forms of standards. And everyone says, well, who takes ownership of it? And in a lot of states, Division of Aviation doesn't necessarily want unmanned aviation. They don't want to hold the reins of that, or Department of Transportation. So we just got back from a state where their Economic Development Board wants to house that, which is a unique concept. Because what happens in a natural disaster? Who calls the shots? Economic development. And emergency management may not want it. But because the Division of Aviation own that, here in our state, everyone is willing to collaborate and come to the table, and it's worked really well so far.
That's great leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. We do kind of similar to Brooks' organization. What was your question, Alisha? How do we support partnerships?
Partnerships, yeah, or examples of good partnerships. Yeah.
Okay, so we do that. We facilitate those kind of organically through meetings and programs. We do it strategically if a member of ours wants to make a connection. But what I want to share, I'm really excited about, is we do that programmatically through something called the North Carolina Cleantech Corridor. So our organization historically has been a marketing organization, rah, let's attract companies to the state, and Cleantech, let's help the ones that are here grow. We received a year ago a federal grant from U.S. Commerce, and by the way, we are the third organization in this region to receive this EDA grant, which shows you kind of the caliber of talent and innovation here. But it is a grant from EDA, and it's essentially about building a region between the what are the economic engines in North Carolina primarily? Charlotte and the Research Triangle. And so how do we take the assets of those two regions and really drive innovation to communities across the state? And so without being long-winded, the crux of this program, it's a 3-year program, is to bring local government, clean tech industry solution providers, and utilities together to talk about their pain points, and then to go out and source startups, bring them back and say, would you like to pilot this solution? And the goals at the end of the day is to help startups to scale, to help them create jobs here. And to your earlier point about collaboration, there are a lot of things that we have to collaborate on. Like if the town of Chapel Hill wants to do smart parking and they want to hang something on their street light, they need the utilities buy-in in order to do that. It's just not, we have to partner on a lot of these really hairy challenges. So anyway, that's one really tangible way that we're partnering.
So we've alluded to this before about the exponential growth that you all are seeing. I'm just kind of curious, from your various roles, how are you looking to sustain that? Because you can only go up for so long, but it's definitely something I'm curious to hear. How do you maintain that over a longer period of time?
Well, the Tech Association does some tracking, some reporting. One of the products we put out or resources we put out is a monthly IT, in this case it is IT job trends report. So we have a partnership with Gartner, and we're able to produce a snapshot that shows each month the previous month's data on the types of open positions that there are across the state, but also broken down by metro. How much that is up or down over the same month prior year, but also we do a 13-month rolling average, so you can see that same month a year ago and every month since then, see trends. Skill sets that are in demand, certifications that are in demand, and we even rank the top 10 hirers of tech talent, and half of that list is usually not tech. It's banks, it's Lowe's Home Improvement, it's organizations that don't immediately come to your mind when you think of tech hirers or tech companies. But anyway, that's one of the things that we produced. It gives us a snapshot or flavor and a trend line of how robust the job market is, what's the demand for the employees. But in terms of sustaining an environment where there is talent to fill those positions over the long haul, I use a term a lot when I speak or am asked this question of sort of we benefit from a triple play. North Carolina, generally, certainly this region among them, benefits from having a very strong pipeline of graduates coming out who stay here. I'll get back to that. We have a very strong attraction of skilled employees, skilled people from other parts of the country who want to come live here and work here. And then we have the existing workforce, and we have a lot of really good infrastructure in place to help upskill and retrain that existing workforce. So when you put those three things together and you're still having a hard time meeting demand, it's at least we've got those three buckets to pull from, and they work together. They put us in a pretty good position. I said I would come back to the people who want to stay here. I mentioned meeting with my counterparts a lot. We're very lucky here to not be a brain drain state. People don't come here to go to school and then kick out. They stay in large measure. And a lot of people go to school elsewhere, maybe get a job in this area, then they want to stay and have their families here. Side note, one side effect of that is North Carolina, the last ranking I saw, ranked 5th in the country in terms of retired couples moving here to be near their grown children and their children, because they are not leaving to go back wherever they might have come from when they came here for a job, came here for school. And so you have this in-migration of youngish seniors who want to be around their families, and so they have to come here. And these are folks typically aren't using much resources, they are spenders. So that's a big impact on our economy, actually.
So I want to pick up on a point that you kind of were talking about in terms of the educational system here, and I think you also brought this up as well, and just wanted to, I guess, pull that thread just a little bit further in talking about how that helps build the capacity, because you are right, you are very unique in that the Research Triangle is well known, and so I'm just kind of curious to hear how you're doing it both from a new worker standpoint, but also from the reskilling standpoint, and just how are you kind of continuously giving people the skills that they need to be successful in the tech ecosystem?
I can chime in. I'm sure you have a big perspective from Montgomery County. So when the Cleantech cluster launched 7 years ago, one of the first questions was, this is a new industry. We just learned what Cleantech is. What are the jobs that these companies that we have need? And so we did sort of some ground truthing around what are the jobs that are going to drive the growth of the industry. And you could sub out energy for any tech, like Brooke said, and it'll be like software developers, data analysts. Those are really driving the growth. But our organization, we do some things both short-term and long-term. Short-term, we host annually a Cleantech career fair. And, kind of like Brooke said, what do millennials, I have my millennial employee here, not that millennials are monolithic, they're very different. I don't mean to paint them with one brush stroke, but, they care about sustainability, innovation, making an impact on the world. So when we host a Cleantech career fair, it gives an opportunity for companies like Cisco or Duke Energy to position themselves under that sustainability umbrella. So we help companies with positioning. We also do targeted outreach because we know, like energy and IT, you can imagine what that workforce historically looks like, And so we do targeted outreach to some of our local HBCUs and to our community colleges, to Wake Tech, so that we are bringing in students who are pursuing maybe 2-year degrees to show them that the energy industry wants you and has opportunities for you. And then we also do some longer term work, like with educator immersion days, whereby, we'll host, EPA did one earlier this year, it was great. They hosted Durham and Wake County educators. They had them do energy games, and then at the end they brainstormed how to create lesson plans from what they learned. But So it's a short and long-term approaches.
From a state perspective, to go back to the last question and bring it full circle to the current question, I don't think it's about an unmanned aviation. It's not about sustainability. It's how do we hold on to the technology that's currently running. Unmanned aviation is going to be very sustainable. It is going to continue to grow. As was said earlier, right now as we're talking, there's medical package deliveries happening right now at Wake Med. In 2 years, your pizza is going to be delivered by a drone. When you think about that, it forces us as a state to evolve and have a rebirth of aviation. It causes our society, economic development, education to evolve into new technology, new practices, but it also is through a rebirth of aviation. So you're seeing new aviation degrees that are based in unmanned, but you're also seeing the technology side of it in careers and education that did not exist prior. In economic development, we're forcing different things to say, hey, we've got all these great properties in North Carolina for manufacturing, come here. We're partnering with existing companies to say, how do we work with your company to embed itself into the current tech? And how do we hold on to that? How do we bring companies that didn't think anything about drones now are some of the leaders in drone technology, saying, wow, we see a road that we can travel with this. So it's a unique flight path that the state is on with education and the birth of unmanned aviation and what it's doing here. But it's causing the state to merge and to evolve as a whole. So it's really unique time.
Do you have any comment?
I think I spoke to your previous question, but rephrase your current question, make sure I'm answering what you want me to ask.
Oh, I was just asking about on the education component and just how you're kind of keeping up to how you're leveraging those partnerships again to not only deal with children, young adults in school as well, actually even, K through 8, post-secondary education, as well as people who need to be retrained.
Well, I was just in a meeting yesterday. There's an initiative underway in North Carolina to ensure that there is a teacher in every middle school and high school in the state who is qualified to teach an introductory, at least, computer science course. And that will take, at current rate of funding, about 11 years, but we're trying to accelerate that to make it 3, and then ongoing. So because the data show that exposure at an earlier age has a many X time impact on the likelihood a person might decide to pursue that sort of field in college or beyond, or even just as an extra area of interest beyond whatever they're majoring in. But in that same meeting, it was reiterated something those of us who are from here know. The community college system in particular is remarkably good at integrating with local businesses in trying to determine what sorts of supplemental training or initial training and education is needed to help people be ready for the jobs or be better prepared for the next job they may be in line for. It's remarkable, actually. I think a lot of us who are from here are so used to that. We hear it all the time. When you go other places, it isn't always as true or as evident. But it's hard to imagine a better comprehensive partnership than the community colleges, the K-12 system, and businesses that North Carolina has. As you hear it from all of those sectors talk about it as being a very meaningful thing. So it's not just like one of them finds it great and the others are not so sure. There's pretty universal agreement on that.
In a few moments, I'll open it up to audience Q&A, but I want to pick up on a point you just mentioned about evolving and just kind of how, and this is for all of you, when you recognize evolution is coming, how are you communicating that with your private sector partners, with government, with education, just as things constantly are churning over? It seems like that's another key component of the communication, just to kind of help people understand what's ahead. So can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that?
Through us, our part is through education. I am housed at a community college, but I work with the Division of Aviation, Emergency Management, and of course run the Academy for Aviation. We're trying to roll out that aspect of trying to bring everybody to the table, as Brooks was saying, through education. Here are going to be the possibilities for the future that are very near. And here's what we need to do to get our society ready and our workforce ready to meet those needs. So what we've done is we've taken an approach for unmanned aviation that we start with the STEM programs across the state, and we do a lot of STEM outreach and helping build STEM programs in unmanned aviation in all the different schools across the state. We also started marketing in early, like middle school, elementary schools, going around talking about unmanned aviation, things like that when we're not training. But through the pathways of the community college system, there are programs being born for unmanned aviation and technology-based jobs that are associated with unmanned aviation that we are partnering to roll into the university, almost like a pathway. So you'll take a high school student and hopefully get them in a pathway or a track to where they start that education. They go through community college if they desire to, and then they will go into a university for those degrees, trying to roll that out to meet the need of the upcoming future of that technology and the growth in aviation.
So one other question from me before I open it up to audience Q&A. As we've alluded to, you all are very lucky. You have a lot of different factors here that just kind of came together. For other maybe states, cities, counties, and the both in the public sector and the non-government sector coming together, what advice would you give them on building a strong tech ecosystem? Yeah, I knew I threw that curveball.
That's a good question.
Well, a lot of what we've talked about, I think, would be advice. A lot of what we've talked about didn't happen overnight, but also a lot of it didn't happen by chance. I mean, you think about the Research Triangle Park. What the Research Triangle Park was and what it is becoming are very different things. It was built to be an industrial, I mean, you had to buy, I don't know if you know this, the Research Triangle Park, from its inception until not too long ago, was legally structured such that if you wanted to come in and be a tenant, you had to buy at least 8 acres. You had to have at least 50% or more of your activity on that site be R&D. You had to have at least 100 feet, I think it was, on all borders around you between the edge of your building and the edge of your property, really keep it that park. But there could not be residential. There could not be retail. There could not be food. None of that. Prohibited. Complete turnaround now, because that's just not the way research parks are developed. You go to a newer research park, whether it's the Centennial campus at NC State or others, and they're completely the opposite of what I've just described. And so now you have our own sort of the granddaddy of research parks that's now 60 years old probably, is completely reimagining itself and how it's going to be organized. So an old dog can learn new tricks, but it helps to purposely connect with the allies and organizations. It helps to purposely connect perhaps competitive institutions, like academic institutions, together. It helps to integrate your K-12, your various levels of education, K-12, community colleges, the universities. Going back many, many years, I remember working probably 20 years ago now. At the time, I was running the foundation that raises corporate dollars for private colleges and universities. And I was on a committee with university system representatives and the community college system to try to develop an articulation agreement. This notion that you should be able to move between these sectors fairly easily, and that NC State couldn't say, well, you had math at that institution, that ain't gonna count here, you can't transfer it. The legislature basically had to say, fix that or we will fix that. So the institutions got together and they developed a way to make that work, and now we have a pretty good, I mean, it's not perfect, much better than it was, and kind of a model for other states. So that's an example where in a competitive environment even, granted they had to be nudged by policymakers to do so, came together and really did some important work to make it much easier for a person to move in and out of different sectors of education. And I think that's one of our strengths here.
I would say teamwork, partnerships, like we discussed, the willingness to say you don't know and learn from each other. We can fly, we can save lives, we can make a difference, but we need tech people. We need educators. It takes all of us to be successful, and working together, I think, is going to be a key.
I'll add maybe a tangible example to that. I would agree with everything Brooks and Riley said. Our organization, if you're in a community that's not the Research Triangle, or you're in another state that's not North Carolina, and you want to give some visibility or connective tissue to your tech ecosystem, what our organization did was our regional economic development organization, nonprofit, convened business leaders around energy leadership, Cleantech, and they said, do you want to make this a growth industry for the region? If so, write a check and fund this thing for 3 years so we can get some legs underneath us and really help RTP be known not just for IT and pharma, but also for clean tech and energy. And so I think the lesson in that is like every community has champions, who can open doors and help you, shake the trees to create resources to give some visibility to whatever your particular assets are. So.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to audience Q&A. We have mics, so please raise your hand. Perfect. And just wait for the mic.
Thank you. It's working? Yeah.
Yes, it's working.
My name is Jolyn Dellinger, and I'm Special Counsel for Privacy Policy and Litigation at the North Carolina Department of Justice. So I was interested because drones have been raised twice today, and it's very interesting technology. I'm wondering if anyone is working on the legal and policy aspects of drone or unmanned aviation, as you were calling it. We have the educational approach, we have DOT. Is anyone working on privacy impact assessments, looking at the legal and policy implications from a privacy perspective of using drones in our state?
Yes, ma'am. They are, and a great deal. So there are all kinds of legal things that are going on, policies and procedures from state level agencies. That is not my world, but I can tell you as being involved with them, there is a lot that goes on. I mean, you guys can imagine, you have a law enforcement department with a drone. That right there, they hate you automatically right out of the gate. You're spying on me, you're trying to arrest me, you're trying to incriminate me. So there is an unbelievable legal aspect to a police or sheriff's department or a SWAT team or anyone in that realm of law enforcement using a drone. So there are all kinds of talks going on right now with how do you secure data? How can that be used in court, which is being used in court. You've got the State Highway Patrol for North Carolina that has a large drone department, and they're having to abide by certain things. And there's a lot being evaluated because of the growth. So in short, yes, there is a lot going on as far as policy and procedures. I'm not the guy to talk to you about policy and procedure, but I know that our team that's here today, they can definitely point you to the right people.
Other questions from the audience?
I do think it's fair to say that in general, policy never keeps up with technology. So that problem exists across all sorts of technologies. And the other challenge is there's the federal layer of regulation, whether it's the FAA or whatever, and then because that can sometimes be very slow, states start to get antsy and begin to do their own policies about it, which can vary state to state. So what does that mean for the first drone airline, which was launched the other day, pardon the pun, UPS, right? Is the first drone airline. Well, they don't operate just in a state, they're national, so how do they navigate? There we go again. It's hard to talk about this without talking about launches and glide paths. So anyway, it's a perennial challenge. I know just from our own membership, we have some law firms, fairly sizable law firms in the area who have now have people or groups within their firms who have really delved into this and are really looking into unmanned aircraft and what the policy implications are. And do you want to actually, a lot of industries do this, does the industry want to propose regulations that they're willing to live under just so there can be something? They would rather know the something than to let it just be handed down or done piecemeal. So sometimes that happens too, it's in reverse. It's those who are, whether it's law enforcement or the state or private industry that in the case of drones are developing this technology, can do amazing things. They would like to know the rules of the game too. And sometimes it gets initiated from them.
And right now, the laws and regulations actually do more hindrance to emergency service operations across the state than they need to. That's something that you're going to see beyond line of sight. Right now, if you look at a Part 107 pilot, a FAA Part 107 pilot, the rules and regulations that govern that pilot are very, very strict. We can't fly out of line of sight. We can't fly over people unless we have special waivers, and those waivers are hard to obtain for certain entities. So there are a lot of rules, laws, and regulations there, and they are all being evaluated from a federal and state level.
close. Good morning, everyone. Not that close, right? Certainly, it's not a question, but what I want to say is thank you for this opportunity. I don't see many other, and maybe there are some public safety officials here, but I think it was Mr. Raiford to talk about sometimes the separation and bringing people together for solutions that may not be from the same industry. Because this is my new best friend here, Swami. Swami from America. We were talking about some solutions that can help me serve the citizens better. And they may not be mainstream, but if we're all in this together, and when we work together, we can come to solutions. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate Route 50. When you have millennials coming in the workforce, they often ask you, why aren't we doing this? Where's the app for that? And it's made me as a fire chief, begin to look for solutions. So again, I just want to thank you for the collaboration, and again, the opportunity to share with all the nerds. You guys call yourself. I don't see any pocket protectors though. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you for your
comment.
service.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Well, I have one last question because we have a few more minutes, and I'm just curious for you all, what's the outlook for you all in your various roles and for the ecosystem in the next couple of months and year, would you say?
I'll jump in. The outlook for the clean tech industry and energy tech is super strong, and I think a couple of things to note. The governor just over a year ago now, announced Executive Order 80, and that is a signal to the market that we are open for business. We're going to put 80,000 electric vehicles on the road. We're going to drive down carbon emissions. It is happening in North Carolina. And in tandem, local governments have said, hey, we're going to be 100% clean energy. And so at the same time, a lot of them will say, we don't know how we're going to get there. And that's where our organization comes in to help connect them to the technology providers. But the outlook is really strong. Just a month ago, Duke Energy pledged to be carbon neutral by 2050. And so, it just sends a strong, strong signal to the country and to the world that North Carolina is open for business.
I'm with Brooks. The puns could be unbelievable, but with unmanned aviation, it's amazing and it's exciting at the same time. The growth is going to be phenomenal. We think for our state and what we're pushing for. So we're very excited.
Great.
I certainly agree that our future is very bright. I think that I was asked once before, some other cities or regions or states have, when you say the name of that city, region, or state, there's like one thing that comes to mind that they're really known for. In North Carolina, other than basketball and barbecue and a few things like that, maybe there's not that one thing or the triangle, that one thing. But when you look at all the ratings that come out, all these rankings that we read, when you're top tier, not always first, although we are many times, when you're top tier in quality of life, cost of living, job opportunities, strength of the economy, educational access and quality, you add all that together, that is a heck of a stew. And we put together a mean soup around here. We're really strong in a lot of those areas, and that is not true everywhere. And so I do think that secret sauce, secret soup, whatever you want to say, it's the mixture of this, the ingredients together that make that happen. And I would offer to you two URLs to jot down. Some of the references I made about some of the data we put out are all available on our website, which is nctech.org. But in addition, there's a separate website where an annual report that we commission comes out every January. So the 2020 version will be coming out here in a couple months. It's got the URL is short, but the name is long. North Carolina State of Technology Industry Report, or ncstir.com, much easier. And the point of bringing that up is it's actually an environmental scan of the 50 states and how North Carolina ranks among the states in dozens and dozens of metrics that taken together paint a picture of our innovation ecosystem here. And it's not a whitewash type deal. There are some areas where we're middling, and there are some areas where we're really strong. And the areas where we're strong aren't all because of some government policy, and the areas where we're middling don't all have a government solution. It's just laying out, here's how we're doing as a state in patent production, in graduating STEM graduates, all the things that together sort of paint a picture on how we're doing. I will say as a little teaser, for the 5 years running, we've had this report out. North Carolina is the #1 state in the country for the percentage of the tech workforce that's female. It's not high enough. You know, when you're the best among poor performers, that's not saying a lot. But still, it's something to hang your hat on. But that ncstir.com website sort of illustrates a lot of the key findings, and that's updated every year. And what you begin to see now that it's going to be a 6th year is, to your question, trends. How are we moving in the right direction? Sometimes you can keep doing as well as you have been doing in real terms, but you're falling behind because others are rising, or vice versa. So it's got a lot of interesting factoids in there that might be of interest to you.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me today. Let's give a round of applause.